She had $20 left until payday, but the homeless man staring at his empty wallet looked hungrier than her empty stomach felt. The afternoon sun beat down on Magnolia Diner like a punishment nobody deserved. Kayla Thompson wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a streak across skin already sticky from the broken air conditioner that management refused to fix. Have you ever felt drawn to a stranger for reasons you couldn't explain? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The lunch rush had died down to nothing but flies buzzing against greasy windows and the steady drip of coffee that had been burning since dawn. That's when he walked in, tall, but hunched over like life had been beating him down for years. His coat hung loose on shoulders that once might have been broad, shoes held together with what looked like electrical tape. Gray stubble covered a face that seemed carved from disappointment itself. He chose the corner booth, the one with the torn vinyl seat that caught on clothes. Most people avoided it. He settled in like he belonged there, among the broken things. Kayla grabbed the coffee pot and walked over. Up close, she could smell him, not the sharp stench of someone who'd given up on hygiene, but something sadder, like soap that had run out weeks ago and pride that wouldn't let him ask for help. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. He looked up. His eyes were blue, the kind of blue that reminded her of winter mornings when everything seemed possible. But there was something else there, something that made her chest tighten. "Just water, please." His voice carried an accent she couldn't place. Not Southern. Somewhere up north, maybe. The kind of voice that belonged in boardrooms, not broken-down diners in Jackson, Mississippi. She poured the coffee anyway. On the house. He started to protest, but she was already walking away. Behind the counter, she watched him wrap both hands around the cup like it was the first warmth he'd felt in months. When she came back with the menu, he was staring at it like it was written in a foreign language. She knew that look. It was the same one her mother got when looking at medical bills. "Everything looks good," he said, not meeting her eyes. "But I think just the water will be fine." Through the worn leather of his wallet, she could see maybe $3. Crumpled bills that had seen better days. Kayla's own wallet held $22. Her tips from the morning, minus the 2 she'd spent on her mother's pain medication. Rent was due tomorrow. Her car needed gas to get to her night job at the grocery store. But something about this man made her forget about math. "You know what?" she said, leaning against the booth. "We had a customer order the meatloaf special and change his mind. Already cooked. Manager says I can either eat it or throw it away." It was a lie, but lies told with kindness didn't count as sins, did they? "I couldn't. Trust me, you be doing me a favor. I've been smelling that gravy all day, and if I eat it, these jeans won't fit tomorrow." She smiled, the kind of smile that made people believe in good things again. He studied her face for a long moment, like he was memorizing it. "That's very kind of you, miss." "Kayla. And kindness is free. Everything else costs too much these days." When she brought the plate, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans that had been sitting under heat lamps since noon, he ate slowly, like he was savoring not just the food, but the feeling of someone caring whether he lived or died. She refilled his coffee 3 times. Each time, their fingers brushed when she set the cup down. Each time, she felt something she couldn't name. Not attraction exactly. The man looked like he'd been sleeping in his car for weeks. But there was something magnetic about him, something that made her want to sit down and ask what had brought him to this place where pride wrestled with hunger. Instead, she kept her distance and watched him eat. The way he cut his meat into precise pieces. The way he used his napkin after every bite. This wasn't a man who'd grown up poor. This was a man who'd fallen from somewhere much higher. When he finished, he sat back and smiled. It transformed his entire face, erasing years of whatever had put those lines around his eyes. "Best meal I've had in months," he said. "Glad you enjoyed it." She started to clear his plate. "What do I owe you?" Like I said, it was already paid for. He reached for his wallet anyway, pulling out those crumpled bills. "For the coffee, at least, and your kindness." Kayla shook her head. "Keep your money. Buy yourself a decent cup of coffee tomorrow." When he stood to leave, she noticed he was taller than she'd thought. Even bent by whatever circumstances had brought him here, He carried himself with a dignity that new clothes and a hot shower couldn't give you. You were either born with it, or you weren't. At the door, he turned back. Thank you, Kayla. You have no idea what this meant to me. Something in his voice made her believe that was truer than he was letting on. After he left, she found herself looking out the window, watching him walk down the street until he disappeared around the corner. Her chest felt tight, like she just said goodbye to someone important. Her manager, Rick, came out of the kitchen wiping grease on his apron. Did that bum pay for his food? He's not a bum, Kayla said, still staring at the empty street. Anyone who looks like that and orders the meatloaf special is either a bum or crazy. Maybe both, Kayla thought. Or maybe something else entirely. Have you ever helped someone without knowing their story? Sometimes the people who need us most are the ones we'd least expect. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Kayla's shoes? That night, as she counted her tips, she was $20 short of what she needed for rent. But for the first time in months, she wasn't worried about money. She was thinking about blue eyes and the way gratitude sounded when it came from someone who'd forgotten how to hope. The richest man in America was sitting in her parking lot, and Kayla had no idea her life had already changed forever. Morning came too early, like it always did. Kayla's alarm screamed at 5:30, dragging her from dreams where bills paid themselves and her mother walked without wincing. Reality hit harder than Mississippi humidity. Rent was due today, her car was making noises that sounded expensive, and her mother's prescription would need refilling by Friday. She tied her hair back, grabbed yesterday's uniform from the floor, and tried not to think about the $20 she'd given away instead of keeping. The diner looked different in the early light. Less desperate, maybe. Morning customers were usually truckers and construction workers. People who tipped in quarters and never complained about burnt coffee. Better than the lunch crowd who wanted five-star service for pocket change. Rick was already behind the grill, grease popping like tiny explosions. You're late. I'm exactly on time. On time is late. Early is on time. Kayla bit back what she really wanted to say. Jobs were hard to find, and jobs that let her work around her mother's doctor appointments were harder still. She was wiping down tables when she saw it through the window. A black SUV with tinted windows, parked like it owned the space. Not unusual, truckers drove big vehicles. But this one was different. Clean. Expensive. The kind of vehicle that belonged in downtown Jackson, not in a parking lot where the asphalt had more holes than surface. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up expecting another trucker wanting coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Instead, she saw a man in a suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary. Tall, broad shoulders, silver hair styled like someone paid attention to details. His face was clean-shaven, revealing sharp cheekbones and those same blue eyes that had haunted her dreams. But these eyes were different now. Confident. Knowing. It was him, the homeless man from yesterday. Except he wasn't homeless at all. Kayla. His voice was different too. Stronger. Used to being listened to. She stood frozen, cloth in one hand, spray bottle in the other, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. You're not what I appear to be yesterday. May I sit? He gestured toward the same corner booth, but everything about him had changed. The way he walked, the way he held his shoulders, even the way he looked at her. Like she was a puzzle he'd already solved. I don't understand. I imagine not. Coffee. She poured without thinking, muscle memory taking over while her brain tried to catch up. When she set the cup down, he was watching her with an intensity that made her skin warm. You paid for my meal yesterday. You seemed hungry. I was. But not for food. The way he said it made something low in her belly flutter. She stepped back, suddenly aware that they were alone except for Rick, who was banging pans in the kitchen like he was fighting a war. What are you talking about? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Heavy paper, expensive printing. Walter Brenner, it read. CEO, Brenner Holdings. I was looking for something very specific yesterday, Kayla. Someone genuine. Someone who would help a stranger without expecting anything in return. You were testing me? In a way. And you passed. The flutter in her belly turned to anger. You lied to me. I never said I was homeless. I never said I was poor. I simply appeared to be both and waited to see how you would respond. She wanted to throw the coffee in his face. She wanted to walk away. Instead, she found herself sitting across from him, drawn by the same magnetic pull she'd felt yesterday. Why? Because I have a proposition for you. A job opportunity that could change your life. I already have a job. He looked around the diner, taking in the cracked vinyl, the stained ceiling tiles, the smell of grease that would never completely wash out of her clothes. This isn't a job, Kayla. This is survival. I'm offering you a chance to live. Doing what? Come work for me. Personal assistant. Executive level. 6 figures to start. The number hit her like cold water. 6 figures. More money than she'd made in her entire life combined. I don't have experience with. You have something more valuable than experience. You have integrity, compassion, the ability to see people as human beings instead of opportunities. He leaned forward, and she caught a hint of expensive cologne mixed with something else. Something that made her think of power and secrets. I need someone I can trust completely. Someone who won't be swayed by money or status. Someone who will tell me the truth, even when it's difficult to hear. And you think that's me? I know it is. You proved it yesterday. Her mind raced through possibilities. 6 figures would mean a real apartment for her and her mother. Medical bills paid in full. Maybe even college, finally. What's the catch? He smiled, and she saw something predatory in it. Smart girl. There's always a catch, isn't there? Before she could respond, Rick appeared at their table. Everything okay here? More than okay, Walt said, standing. Miss Thompson, I'll need an answer by 5 o'clock today. He placed another business card on the table, this one with a phone number written on the back in expensive ink. Call that number if you're interested in changing your life. If not, I understand. Not everyone is ready for what I'm offering. He walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Kayla? Yesterday's meal was the best investment I've made in years. After he left, she stared at the card until the numbers blurred together. Rick was asking questions she couldn't hear over the pounding of her heart. 6 figures. A way out. Everything she'd ever wanted, offered by a man who'd lied about who he was from the moment they met. What would you do if a stranger offered to change your life? Would you trust someone who'd already deceived you once? Sometimes the biggest opportunities come from the most unexpected places. Tell me in the comments, would you make that call? She made the call at 4:59, and by 6 p.m., her old life was already disappearing in the rearview mirror. Kayla's hand shook as she dialed the number. Part of her hoped it would go to voicemail, giving her more time to think. Instead, he answered on the first ring. I was beginning to think you wouldn't call. I almost didn't. What changed your mind? She looked around her apartment, if you could call it that. 2 rooms, both smaller than most people's closets. Water stains on the ceiling that bloomed like ugly flowers every time it rained. Her mother asleep in the bedroom, snoring softly around the pain medication that barely touched her arthritis anymore. I need to know what the catch is. The real catch. Fair enough. Are you free this evening? I work nights at. Not anymore. I'll have someone cover your shifts, both of them. Can you be ready to travel in 2 hours? Travel where? Does it matter? The question hung between them like a challenge. Her entire life had been about playing it safe. Working jobs that barely paid enough to survive, dating men who wanted more than they were willing to give, making choices based on fear instead of possibility. No, she heard herself saying. It doesn't matter. Good. Pack light. 1 bag. Someone will pick you up at 7. The line went dead. Kayla stared at her phone, wondering if she'd just made the best decision of her life or the worst. Her mother was awake when she knocked on the bedroom door. Margaret Thompson had been beautiful once, before arthritis twisted her hands and poverty bent her back. Now, she looked like a faded photograph of herself. Mama, I need to tell you something. You're leaving. It wasn't a question. How did you? You have that look. Same one you had when you graduated high school and wanted to go to college. Like you're seeing something the rest of us can't. Kayla sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under her weight, springs creaking a familiar protest. This man offered me a job. Good money. Really good money. What kind of job? Personal assistant. Executive level. Margaret reached for her daughter's hand with fingers that barely bent anymore. And what does this man want in return? I don't know yet. That's what worries me. They sat in silence, listening to the neighbor's TV through walls thin as paper. Finally, Margaret squeezed her daughter's hand. You're going anyway. The money could change everything, Mama. Your medical bills, this place. I don't want you selling yourself for my sake. It's not like that, isn't it? Rich man shows up out of nowhere, offers you more money than makes sense. Baby girl, there's always a price. But even as she said it, Margaret was already calculating what 6 figures could mean. Doctors who took their time instead of rushing through appointments. Medication that worked instead of barely managing. Maybe even a place with central air and floors that didn't creak warnings about the apartment below. At exactly 7 o'clock, a black sedan pulled up outside. Not the SUV from earlier. Something smaller, but just as expensive. The driver was a woman about Kayla's age, dressed like she belonged in a magazine. Ms. Thompson? I'm Sarah, Mr. Brenner's assistant. Well, one of them. Sarah loaded Kayla's single duffel bag into the trunk like it weighed nothing. The car's interior smelled like leather and money. How long have you worked for him? Kayla asked as they pulled away from the only home she'd ever known. 3 years. Best job I've ever had. What's he like? Really? Sarah glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Demanding. Fair. Unpredictable. He'll push you harder than you think you can be pushed, then reward you in ways you never imagined. There was something in her voice that made Kayla wonder exactly what kind of reward Sarah was talking about. They drove to a small airport outside Jackson, where a private jet waited on the tarmac like something from a movie. Kayla had never been on a plane before, let alone one with leather seats and a flight attendant who offered champagne like it was water. Where are we going? She asked Sarah as they buckled in. Colorado. Mr. Brenner has a place there. What kind of place? Sarah smiled, and there was something almost sympathetic in it. You'll see. The flight took 3 hours. Kayla spent most of it staring out the window, watching America scroll by below like a map coming to life. Lights scattered across darkness, each one representing lives she'd never imagined. When they landed, another car was waiting. This one climbed roads that wound through mountains Kayla had only seen in pictures. The air was thin and clean, nothing like the heavy humidity of Mississippi. The house appeared gradually through the trees. At first, she thought it was a hotel. Then she realized it was just home to one person. Glass and stone, and wood that seemed to grow from the mountainside itself. Windows that stretched floor to ceiling, revealing rooms larger than entire floors of buildings she'd known. Everything lit with warm light that made it look like something from a fairy tale. Welcome to Aspen, Sarah said as they pulled into a circular driveway. Walt was waiting on the front steps, still in that expensive suit, but somehow more relaxed here. Like he'd shed some invisible burden along with his homeless disguise. How was the flight? Unbelievable. Kayla stepped out of the car, legs unsteady from more than just the altitude. This place is home. At least, I hope it will feel that way to you. He gestured toward the entrance, where warm light spilled across stone steps. Everything about this place whispered money so old and deep it didn't need a shout. But as beautiful as it was, Kayla couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't seeing everything. That behind all this luxury, something else was waiting. Have you ever walked into a situation that felt too good to be true? Have you ever had to choose between safety and possibility? Sometimes the most beautiful cages are the hardest to recognize. Drop a heart in the comments if you've ever felt like you were in over your head. She wasn't the only one who had passed his test, and the woman who opened the front door looked like everything Kayla wasn't. The woman was stunning in a way that made magazines look amateur. Tall, with skin the color of coffee with just enough cream and cheekbones that could cut glass. Her hair fell in perfect waves to her shoulders, and she wore a dress that probably cost more than Kayla's car. You must be the competition, she said, extending a hand with nails painted the exact shade of red that matched her lipstick. I'm sorry. Deja Williams, Detroit. And unless Walt's collecting waitresses for charity, we're here for the same reason. Before Kayla could respond, Walt appeared behind the woman. In the warm light of his home, he looked younger than he had at the diner. More dangerous. I see you've met Deja. Please, both of you come in. The foyer was larger than Kayla's entire apartment had been. A chandelier that looked like captured starlight hung above marble floors that reflected everything like still water. Art covered the walls, not prints, but original paintings that belonged to museums. Deja arrived this morning, Walt said, leading them deeper into the house. From a D. Not a setup, a search. I've been looking for someone special for quite some time. They entered a living room with windows that showed mountains stretching to the horizon. The furniture was modern but comfortable, arranged around a fireplace that could have heated her old apartment twice over. Looking for someone for what? Deja asked, settling onto a white leather sofa like she belonged there. Walt poured 3 glasses of wine from a bottle that probably cost more than Kayla made in a week. The liquid was dark red, almost black, and it tasted like something that had been waiting centuries to be appreciated. An opportunity, a partnership, a chance to be part of something extraordinary. You're being deliberately vague, Deja said, crossing legs that seemed to go on forever. We left our lives behind based on a phone call. The least you could do is tell us why. Kayla found herself studying this other woman, trying to understand what Walt saw in her that he also saw in herself. Deja was confident in a way Kayla had never been, comfortable with luxury like she'd been born to it. Everything about her screamed sophistication, from her perfect posture to the way she held her wine glass. You're both here because you passed a very specific test, Walt said. Not just kindness, but the right kind of kindness. Genuine care for a stranger's welfare, with no expectation of reward. How many of us are there? Kayla asked. Just you two, out of dozens of tests across 12 states. Only you two responded exactly as I hoped. And what happens now? Deja's voice carried a hint of challenge that made Kayla wonder what kind of life she'd left behind in Detroit. Walt set down his wine glass and moved to the windows. Against the backdrop of mountains and sky, he looked like someone who was used to owning everything he could see. Now comes the real test. Something in his tone made both women go quiet. Outside, the sun was setting behind peaks that looked like broken teeth against the sky. I'm 73 years old. I built an empire worth more than some countries' entire economies. I have no children, no family, no one to leave it to. He turned back to face them, and the light from the setting sun made his eyes look almost predatory. I'm looking for an heir, someone to inherit not just my wealth, but my legacy, my companies, my foundation, everything. And you're choosing between us, Deja said. It wasn't a question, in a way, but it's not just about choice. It's about compatibility, about finding someone who can not only handle the responsibility, but who deserves it. Kayla felt the room shift around her. This wasn't just about a job anymore. This was about a life she'd never imagined, a future that could change everything not just for her, but for everyone she'd ever cared about. What kind of compatibility? She asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Walt smiled, and there was something almost predatory in it. Every kind. Personal, professional, physical. The word hung in the air like smoke. Deja laughed, a sound like glass breaking. So we're auditioning to be your mistress and your heir? I prefer to think of it as finding my partner in every sense of the word. Someone who can match my ambition, my drive, my needs. He moved closer to where they sat, and Kayla could smell his cologne again. Expensive and complex, like everything else about him. The woman I choose will want for nothing. She'll have power most people can't imagine. Influence. The ability to change lives, to shape the future. And all we have to do is compete for your attention like prize cattle, Deja said, but there was interest in her voice despite the sarcasm. You're free to leave anytime. Both of you. I'll arrange transportation back to your old lives, with a substantial thank you for your time. But even as he said it, they all knew neither woman was going anywhere. Not when they'd gotten this close to something extraordinary. Kayla looked at Deja, who was studying her with eyes that missed nothing. This woman was everything she wasn't. Sophisticated, confident, comfortable with games Kayla didn't even know existed. How long do we have? Kayla asked. As long as it takes. Days. Weeks. However long it takes for me to be certain. Have you ever competed with someone for something you desperately wanted? Have you ever found yourself changing who you are to fit someone else's expectations? Sometimes the things we want most come with prices we never anticipated. Tell me in the comments, would you stay and compete or walk away with your dignity intact? By the third day, Kayla realized she was living in the most beautiful prison she'd ever seen, and Deja was playing by rules no one had bothered to explain. Morning came with coffee delivered to her room by silent staff who appeared and disappeared like helpful ghosts. Kayla's room was larger than most people's homes, with a bed so comfortable she felt guilty sleeping in it. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed her mountains that changed color with the light, and a bathroom with a tub deep enough to swim in. But luxury felt different when you knew you were being watched, evaluated, judged against someone else who seemed born for this life. She found Deja in the kitchen, wearing silk pajamas that probably cost more than Kayla's monthly rent. The other woman was reading something on her phone while eating strawberries that looked like they'd been polished. "Sleep well?" Deja asked without looking up. "The bed's amazing. Everything here is amazing." That's the point. Deja finally met her eyes. Question is, what's he expecting us to do to earn it? Before Kayla could respond, Walt entered. Even in casual clothes, jeans that fit perfectly, and a shirt that probably cost more than most people's cars, he commanded the space around him. "Good morning, ladies. I trust you're settling in. We're getting acquainted with our accommodations," Deja said, her voice carrying layers of meaning that made Walt smile. "Excellent. I thought today we might discuss expectations." He poured himself coffee from a machine that looked like it belonged on a space station, then leaned against the marble counter. Everything about his posture suggested control, patience, power. "You're both wondering what this is really about. What I want from you. What you need to do to win." "The thought had crossed our minds," Kayla said. "It's simple, really. I'm looking for a partner. Someone who can handle not just the wealth, but the responsibility that comes with it. The decisions, the power to change lives. And you're testing us how exactly?" Deja's question carried a challenge that seemed to amuse him. "By seeing how you handle being here, how you adapt, how you treat the staff, each other, me." He moved closer, and Kayla caught that scent again. Power mixed with something else. Something that made her body react in ways she wasn't comfortable acknowledging. There are no rules except one. Be yourselves. Authentic, genuine. The qualities that brought you here in the first place. What about physical compatibility? The question slipped out before Kayla could stop it, and she felt her cheeks burn. Walt's smile was slow, predatory. "What about it? You mentioned it yesterday. I just wondered. If you're asking whether I expect intimacy as part of this arrangement, the answer is no. I expect chemistry. Connection. The kind of attraction that makes partnership possible." Deja laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut. "Chemistry, right? And if we happen to fall into bed with you, that's just a happy coincidence. If that happens, it will be because you want it to happen, not because it's required." But the way he looked at both of them suggested he expected it to happen. "Soon. What about her?" Kayla nodded toward Deja. "Are we supposed to pretend we're not in competition? Are you?" Walt's question seemed genuinely curious. Before either woman could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted. "I need to take this call. Business emergency. Feel free to explore the grounds. There's a pool, a gym, hiking trails. Make yourselves at home." After he left, silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. "So," Deja said finally, "this is awkward." Despite everything, Kayla laughed. "That's one word for it. Look, Mississippi. Kayla, I like you. You seem sweet, genuine, all those things he says he's looking for. But I need this more than you do." There was something raw in Deja's voice that made Kayla look at her more carefully. Under all that polish and confidence, something desperate was hiding. "What do you mean?" Deja was quiet for so long Kayla thought she wouldn't answer. When she spoke, her voice was different. Smaller. "I have a daughter, 8 years old. Her father took off when she was 2, left me with nothing but debt and a kid who deserves better than I can give her." She stood up, walking to the window that showed gardens so perfect they looked painted. "I've been working 3 jobs, trying to keep us afloat. Living in my sister's spare room, buying clothes at thrift stores, watching my baby girl pretend she doesn't care that she can't have what other kids have. Deja, This isn't just about me, you understand? This is about her future, her college fund, her chance to be something more than her mother managed to become. Kayla felt something twist in her chest. She'd thought this was about competition, about two women vying for one man's attention. But it was about desperation, about mothers doing whatever it took to save their children. My mother has arthritis, Kayla said quietly. The kind that's eating her joints from the inside out. The medication that might help costs more than I make in 6 months. They looked at each other across the expensive kitchen, two women who'd been thrown together by circumstance and need. So we both have reasons to want this, Deja said. Yeah. And we both know only one of us is going home with it. Yeah. Deja moved closer, and Kayla caught a hint of her perfume. Something floral and expensive, but with an edge that suggested danger. Then I guess we understand each other. I guess vedo. But understanding didn't make it easier. If anything, knowing why Deja needed this made the competition feel more dangerous. Because now it wasn't just about wanting something better. It was about saving the people they loved most. Have you ever wanted something so badly you'd do anything to get it? Have you ever had to choose between your own needs and someone else's desperation? Sometimes the most dangerous competition isn't with strangers, but with people whose pain mirrors your own. Share in the comments. How far would you go to save someone you love? The pool water was warm against her skin, but Kayla felt cold watching Walt's hands move across Deja's shoulders, teaching her the proper backstroke technique. It had been Deja's idea to swim. Of course it had been. The woman seemed to have an instinct for creating situations where her body looked its absolute best. And in a bikini that left nothing to the imagination, Deja looked like something carved from dark honey and desire. Kayla sat on the pool's edge, feet dangling in water that probably cost more to heat than most people spend on groceries. She found a one-piece in the guest room closet. Everything in her size, which should have been flattering, but somehow felt calculated instead. Walt moved through the water like he belonged there. His shoulders were broader than the expensive suits had suggested, his chest mapped with muscle that came from actual work, not just expensive gyms. Silver hair, slicked back, revealed a face that looked younger in the afternoon sun. You're being too rigid, he told his voice carrying across the water. Swimming is about flow. Rhythm. Let me show you. His hands slipped under her back, supporting her as she floated. The position was intimate without being inappropriate. Technically, but the way Deja's eyes fluttered closed, the small sound she made when his fingers pressed against her spine, none of that was technical. Better, Walt murmured, and something in his voice made Kayla's chest tighten. Aren't you coming in? Deja called to her, voice breathless from more than just exercise. I don't really swim. Everyone can swim, Walt said, moving toward the pool's edge where she sat. It's just about trusting the water to hold you. He lifted himself out in one smooth motion, water streaming from his body. Up close, she could see scars across his chest. Old ones, faded to silver lines that spoke of a past more complicated than his current wealth suggested. Come on. He extended his hand. I'll teach you. She wanted to say no. Every instinct told her this was dangerous territory. But when it playing it safe ever gotten her anything worth having? His hand was warm, calloused in unexpected places. The hands of someone who'd worked for what he had, not inherited it. When he helped her into the water, his touch lingered longer than necessary. The water was deeper than it looked. She had to stand on her toes to keep her head above the surface. Walt noticed immediately. Hold on to the edge. We'll start with floating. But when she tried to follow his instructions, panic set in. Water covered her ears, muffling sound. She couldn't find the bottom with her feet. Her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape. Strong arms lifted her immediately. Walt pulled her against his chest, letting her wrap her legs around his waist for stability. The position should have been embarrassing. Instead, it felt safe. I've got you, he said against her ear. You're okay. She could feel every inch of him through the thin fabric of her swimsuit. The solid warmth of his chest, the strength in his arms, the way his breath stirred her hair. When she looked up, his face was inches from hers. Something passed between them. Recognition. Want. Possibility. Well, that's cozy. Deja's voice cut through the moment like a blade. She was treading water a few feet away, watching them with eyes that missed nothing. Kayla tried to pull away, but Walt's grip tightened slightly, not restraining her, but reminding her that she had choices. She's afraid of deep water, he said calmly. Lots of people are afraid of things they're not used to. Deja's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. The question is whether they let fear control them. There was a challenge in her words that went far beyond swimming. Kayla felt Walt's chest rumble with quiet laughter. Very true, he said. Fear can be limiting. He loosened his hold, letting Kayla float on her own while keeping one hand on her back for support. The position was still intimate, but less obviously so. Try again, he said softly. Trust me to keep you safe. This time, she managed to float for almost 30 seconds before panic took over. But those 30 seconds felt like flying. Beautiful, Walt said, and she wasn't sure if he meant her swimming or something else entirely. They spent the next hour in the water. Walt's hands on her waist, teaching her to kick. His voice in her ear, coaching her breathing. His body close enough that she could feel the heat coming off his skin despite the cool water. Deja participated, but something had shifted. She was still stunning, still graceful, but there was tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there before. When it finally got out, Walt handed them both towels from a stack that probably cost more than most people's entire bathroom sets. Dinner at 8, he said. Maria's making something special. As he walked away, both women watched him go. His body moved with the confidence of someone used to being watched, wanted, pursued. You're playing a dangerous game, Deja said quietly once he was gone. What do you mean? The helpless act. Men like him, they have a rescue complex. Make yourself the victim, and they'll move heaven and earth to save you. It wasn't an act. I really can't swim. Can't you? Deja's eyes were cold now. Or did you just find the perfect way to get his hands on you? The accusation hit like a slap. Because part of it was true. She had enjoyed his touch, his attention, the way he'd looked at her like she was precious instead of disposable. You think I'm faking being afraid? I think you're smarter than you pretend to be. Sweet little waitress from Mississippi, scared of her own shadow. It's a good act. Very appealing to a man who has everything except something genuine to protect. Kayla felt anger rise in her chest. Hot and unfamiliar. You don't know anything about me, don't I? We're more alike than you want to admit. Both of us willing to do whatever it takes to win. The only difference is I'm honest about it. Deja wrapped her towel around her waist like armor, transforming back into the sophisticated woman who'd opened the door 3 days ago. But here's what you need to understand. I've been playing games like this a lot longer than you have. And I'm very, very good at winning. She walked away, hips swaying in a rhythm that promised things Kayla couldn't even imagine, leaving her alone by a pool that suddenly felt more like a battlefield than a paradise. What happens when kindness becomes strategy? When vulnerability becomes a weapon? Have you ever found yourself changing who you are to get what you want? Tell me in the comments. Is it still authentic if it works? The nightmare came at 3 a.m., dragging Kayla from sleep with her mother's voice screaming her name through flames that tasted like hospital disinfectant and unpaid bills. She woke, gasping, sheets twisted around her legs like restraints. The luxury bedroom felt foreign in the darkness, all shadows and expensive furniture that belonged to someone else's life. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was or why silk pajamas felt wrong against her skin. Then memory crashed back. Walt. Deja. The choice that could save her mother or destroy everything she'd ever believed about herself. Her phone showed 17 missed calls, all from the same number. Her hand shook as she dialed voicemail. Kayla, baby, it's Mama. I'm in the hospital. The pain got bad, real bad, and Mrs. Johnson next door. She called the ambulance. They're saying things I don't understand. About surgery. About how much time. Her mother's voice broke. I need you, baby. I need you to come home. The message was 6 hours old. Kayla was pulling clothes from drawers before her mind caught up with her body. Jeans. T-shirt. The sneakers she'd worn from Mississippi that looked cheap and desperate in this place full of beautiful things. She was stuffing everything in her bag when the knock came. "Kayla." Walt's voice, concerned. "Are you all right?" "I heard." She opened the door. He stood in the hallway, wearing nothing but silk pajama pants that hung low on his hips. In the dim light, the scars on his chest looked like a map of violence survived. "I have to go home. My mother." "I know. Maria told me about the calls. She monitors all communications for security reasons. You've been listening to my phone calls? I've been protecting my investment." His voice carried no apology. "Your mother is being moved to a private room as we speak. The best cardiac surgeon in Mississippi is flying in from New Orleans. Her bills are handled." The words hit her like cold water. Relief and fury and something else she couldn't name. "You had no right. I had every right. You're here at my invitation, which makes your welfare my responsibility. That extends to people you care about. The same one it's always been. Partnership, in every sense of the word." He lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. In the dim light, they looked almost black. "Your mother will live. She'll have the best doctors, the best facilities, medication that actually works instead of just managing symptoms. You can give her that life. And all I have to do is win. Beat Deja. Prove you're the woman I've been looking for." His thumb traced her lower lip, and she felt her body respond despite everything. Despite the manipulation, the games, the way he'd turned her mother's crisis into leverage. "How do I do that?" "By being yourself. The woman who gave her last $20 to a stranger. The woman who jumps into deep water, even when she's terrified." He leaned closer, and she could feel his breath against her lips. "The woman who's brave enough to take what she wants instead of waiting for someone to give it to her." The kiss was soft at first, testing. When she didn't pull away, it deepened into something hungry and demanding. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer. She kissed him back, letting weeks of fear and desperation pour into the contact. He tasted like power and possibility, like all the things she'd never dared to want. When they broke apart, she was breathing hard. "This is what you want?" she asked. "This is how I win. This is how you choose. The question is what you're choosing." Before she could respond, footsteps in the hallway broke the spell. They sprang apart as Deja's voice carried through the partially opened door. "Walt, is everything okay? I thought I heard." She appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with eyes that missed nothing. Walt on Kayla's bed, both of them breathing hard, the air thick with want and consequences. "Just checking on our guest," Walt said smoothly. "Family emergency. All handled now." But Deja's smile was sharp as broken glass. "I'm sure it is. You're so good at handling things." After Walt left, Deja lingered in the doorway. "Checkmate," she said softly. "Well played, Mississippi. Well played. Have you ever had to choose between what's right and what's necessary? Have you ever let someone save you, knowing it would cost everything you believed about yourself? Sometimes survival requires compromise. But how much compromise before you lose who you were trying to save? Share your thoughts in the comments. 2 days later, Kayla found Deja's suitcase by the front door and realized the other woman was about to disappear just like Walt wanted her to. The house felt different that morning. Quieter, like something important was ending before it had really begun. Kayla had spent 48 hours replaying that kiss, the way Walt's hands had felt in her hair, the taste of power on his lips. But she'd also spent those hours thinking about Deja's 8-year-old daughter, about desperation that looked different but felt exactly the same. Maria was loading the suitcase into the same black sedan that had brought them from the airport. The housekeeper's face showed nothing, but her movements were gentle, like she was handling something fragile instead of just expensive luggage. "Going somewhere?" Kayla asked, though she already knew the answer. Deja appeared on the stairs, wearing a traveling outfit that probably cost more than Kayla's monthly rent back in Mississippi. Everything about her looked perfect except her eyes. Those looked tired in a way that expensive concealer couldn't fix. Back to Detroit. Back to reality. "Did he ask you to leave?" "He didn't have to. We both know how this story ends." Deja stopped in front of the hallway mirror, checking lipstick that didn't need checking. In the reflection, Kayla could see something broken hiding behind all that perfection. He kissed you, Deja said without turning around. Night before last. In your room. How did you? I know men like Walt. I know how they operate. They make you feel special, chosen, like you're the only woman in the world who matters. Until you're not. She finally turned, and Kayla saw tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. You want to know the difference between us? You still believe in fairy tales. You think this is about love, about connection, about finding your soulmate who happens to be rich enough to solve all your problems. And you don't. I think it's about survival, about doing whatever it takes to protect the people who matter most, even if it means becoming someone you don't recognize. Deja moved toward the door, heels clicking against marble that would echo long after she was gone. I would have done anything for that little girl. Anything. But I can't compete with authenticity. Can't fake the kind of wide-eyed innocence that makes men want to corrupt it. The words hit like a physical blow. That's not what this is, isn't it? Sweet little waitress, so pure, so grateful for every crumb he throws your way. You played it perfectly, better than I ever could. Walt appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by voices that carried too much emotion for the early hour. He was fully dressed in another one of those suits that cost more than most people's cars, but something about his posture looked defensive. Defa, I thought you might want to say goodbye. To who? To you? To the man who turned two desperate women into entertainment. She walked up those stairs like she owned them, stopping close enough to Walt that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Or to her. To the woman who won a game she didn't even know she was playing. It was never a game. Everything is a game with men like you. The question is whether the players know the rules. She reached up and touched his face, the gesture almost tender, almost loving. Take care of her, Walt. She's going to need it. Because when this fantasy ends, when real life comes knocking, she's going to learn what I already know. Nothing comes free. Especially not love. The kiss she gave him was brief, decisive. A punctuation mark on something that was ending before it had really begun. When she pulled away, she looked at Kayla. He's going to hurt you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. Men like him always do. They can't help it. Power corrupts everything, even love. Defa. But maybe you'll be different. Maybe you'll be the one who changes him instead of the other way around. Stranger things have happened. She walked down those stairs with her head high, every step deliberate. At the door, she paused. Tell my daughter I tried. She said to no one in particular. Tell her mama, try to give her everything. The silence after the door closed felt like a hell breath. Walt stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at the space where Deja had been. Kayla couldn't read his expression, couldn't tell if what she saw was relief or regret. Are you happy? She asked. Are you? The question hung between them like smoke. Because the truth was complicated. Yes, she was relieved that the competition was over, that she didn't have to watch Walt's hands on another woman's skin. But she was also hollowed out by Deja's words, by the suggestion that she'd won something that might not be worth having. What happens now? Walt came down the stairs slowly, like a man approaching something that might bite. Now we find out if she was right. If this was all just a game to me. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with something else. Something that smelled like victory and consequences. Was it? Instead of answering, he kissed her. Different from the kiss in her bedroom. This one tasted like possession, like claiming something that was finally, completely his. When he pulled away, his eyes were darker than she'd ever seen them. Pack your things. We're going to New York. It's time you saw what you've really won. Have you ever gotten exactly what you wanted, only to wonder if the price was too high? Have you ever won something by default and felt like you'd lost anyway? Sometimes victory tastes like ashes. Sometimes getting everything means losing yourself. What would you do in Kayla's position? Share your thoughts below. New York hit Kayla like a slap of cold water mixed with car exhaust and a million dreams that had died on concrete streets. The private jet landed at a small airport she'd never heard of, where another black car waited to carry them into the city Walt called home. Through bulletproof windows, she watched America scroll by in reverse, from the quiet wealth of suburban streets to neighborhoods where hope came with bars on the windows. My apartment is in Manhattan, Walt said, not looking up from his phone. Upper East Side. You'll like it. But his voice carried distance that hadn't been there in Colorado. Like the man who'd kissed her in that marble hallway had stayed in the mountains while someone else wore his expensive suits. The apartment building looked like something from a movie. Doormen in uniforms that cost more than her old car. Marble lobbies with ceilings so high they made her dizzy. The elevator climbed so many floors she felt her ears pop. Walt's apartment took up the entire top floor of a building that probably cost more than her hometown's entire annual budget. Windows showed Central Park spread below like a green carpet, and the Hudson River cutting through the city like a silver scar. "How long have you lived here?" she asked, trying to make conversation that felt normal. 25 years. Bought it right after my first major acquisition. He moved through the space like he owned it, which he did, but also like he was performing ownership for an audience. Everything was beautiful and cold and perfect, like a museum where someone happened to sleep. "Where do I?" "Guest room for now. Down the hall. Maria's already arranged everything." "For now." The words carried weight she couldn't identify. That night, she lay in a bed that cost more than most people's annual salary and listened to the city breathe outside her windows. 8 million people sleeping and dreaming and surviving, and she'd never felt more alone. When she woke, Walt was gone. A note on expensive paper told her he had meetings, that she should explore the city, that his driver would take her anywhere she wanted to go. She chose to walk instead. The streets moved like rivers, carrying everything from tourists with cameras to business people who looked through her like she was invisible. The noise was overwhelming. Cars and construction and conversations in languages she couldn't identify. But under it all, she heard something else. Energy. Possibility. The sound of people refusing to give up. She found herself in a diner that reminded her of Magnolia back home. Same cracked vinyl, same coffee that had been burning too long, same tired waitress who looked like she was counting hours until her shift ended. The girl couldn't have been older than 20, with dark circles under her eyes and hands that shook slightly when she poured coffee. When she dropped a plate, the sound made everyone turn to stare. "I'm sorry," the girl said to the angry customer. "I'll get you another." "Forget it. Just bring me the check." Kayla watched the girl's face crumple, watched her try to hold back tears that had nowhere to go. She saw herself 6 months ago, 6 weeks ago, before Walt's money had changed everything. Without thinking, she stood up. "Excuse me," she said to the angry customer. "She's having a rough day. We all have them. How about I buy your lunch and you give her another chance?" The man looked her up and down, taking in clothes that probably cost more than he made in a month. His expression shifted from anger to embarrassment. "That's not necessary. It's not necessary to be kind to each other either, but it makes everything better." After he left, the waitress approached her table with eyes full of gratitude and suspicion. "Why did you do that?" "Because I know what it feels like to drop things when your hands won't stop shaking." They talked for an hour. The girl's name was Carmen, and she was working 3 jobs to support her sick grandmother. Her story was different from Kayla's but felt exactly the same. Poverty with teeth, dreams deferred, love that made you strong enough to survive anything. When Kayla left, she pressed $200 into Carmen's hand. More money than the girl would make in tips all week. "I can't take this." "Yes, you can. I can't take back all the times no one helped me, but I can help you today." Walking back to Walt's building, Kayla felt something shift in her chest. For the first time since leaving Mississippi, she felt like herself again. Walt was waiting in the apartment, still in his business suit, but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. He looked tired in a way that money couldn't fix. "How was your first day in the city?" "Educational." She told him about Carmen, about the diner, about the feeling of helping someone without expecting anything in return. As she talked, his expression changed, became more focused, more interested. "You gave her $200. She needed it. You've been in this apartment for less than 24 hours, and you're already giving away money that isn't technically yours yet." There was something in his voice she couldn't identify. Not anger exactly, but not approval either. It felt right. "And if I told you that was a test? That I had someone follow you today to see what you would do with freedom and resources?" The words hit her like ice water. "Did you? Does it matter?" Yes, it matters. It matters if every moment of my life is some kind of performance for your entertainment. Walt moved closer, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Something that looked almost vulnerable. What if I told you that everything has been a test, but you've passed them all without trying? What if I told you that watching you be yourself is the most beautiful thing I've seen in 20 years? He cupped her face in his hands, and she felt that electric current again. Stronger now, in the heart of his city, surrounded by his life. What if I told you I'm falling in love with you, and it scares me more than any business deal I've ever made? When have you felt tested by life without knowing it? When has being yourself been the hardest thing you've ever done? Love and power make dangerous combinations. Sometimes the greatest risk is letting someone see who you really are. Tell me in the comments, would you trust someone who's been watching your every move? 6 weeks later, Walt asked her to marry him in a restaurant that cost more than most people's cars, and Kayla realized she was about to say yes to a man she wasn't sure she could trust. The ring was everything she'd never dreamed of wanting. A diamond so large it caught light from across the room, set in platinum that felt heavy with possibility. The other diners pretended not to stare, but she could feel their attention like heat against her skin. Say something, Walt said, and for the first time since she'd known him, his voice carried uncertainty. The past 6 weeks had been a fairy tale with sharp edges. Broadway shows from box seats that cost more than her mother's monthly medication. Shopping trips where the salespeople called her by name and nothing had price tags. Dinners at restaurants where reservations were made months in advance, and the wine cost more than she used to make in a week. But it was the quiet moments that had changed everything. Walt reading to her from books he'd loved as a child. His hands gentle on her shoulders when she woke from nightmares about poverty and loss. The way he listened when she talked about her mother, her dreams, her fear that she was disappearing into someone else's life. I love you, she said, and meant it, but I don't know if I trust you. The honesty hung between them like smoke. Around them, the restaurant continued its expensive dance, crystal glasses touching, quiet laughter, the soft clink of silver against china that cost more than most people's rent. What would it take, he asked, for you to trust me? The truth. About everything. About the tests, the games, what you really want from me. Walt leaned back in his chair, and she saw him make a decision. The mask he wore for the world shifted, revealing something rawer underneath. My father was a construction worker in Brooklyn. Died when I was 12, left my mother with 3 kids, and debt that followed us like a curse. I wore the same pair of shoes for 2 years because we couldn't afford new ones. His voice carried memories that money couldn't erase. I built everything I have from nothing. Every dollar, every company, every connection. And somewhere along the way, I realized that having everything meant nothing if you had no one genuine to share it with. So you decided to buy someone genuine? I decided to find someone who understood what it meant to have nothing. Someone who wouldn't love me for what I could give them, but for who I was underneath all of this. He gestured around the restaurant, at the life he'd built from poverty and determination. The tests were real, but they weren't about seeing if you were good enough for my world. They were about seeing if my world was good enough for you. She felt something loosen in her chest. The fear that had been living there since the day she'd walked into his world of private jets and marble floors. And Deja was exactly what she appeared to be. Beautiful, intelligent, capable. But she wanted what I could give her, not who I was. And I don't. You gave $200 to a stranger the first day you had access to real money. You call your mother every night, even though she tells you the same stories about her soap operas. You haven't bought yourself anything that wasn't necessary since you've been here. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. You're still the woman who gave her last $20 to someone she thought needed it more. Money hasn't changed that. The ring felt warm against her skin, heavy with possibility and promise. If I say yes, what happens to me? To who I am? You become my partner. In business, in life, in everything. You help me decide which charities to fund, which causes to support. You use resources most people can't imagine to change lives the way you changed mine. And if I say no, You go back to Mississippi with enough money to take care of your mother for the rest of her life. No strings attached. No conditions. The offer was real. She could see it in his eyes, hear it in his voice. He would let her walk away, let her choose a smaller life that belonged completely to herself. But she thought about Carmen at the diner, about all the Carmens in the world who needed someone to see their worth, about the power to help instead of just survive. I have conditions, she said. Name them. I want to set up a foundation. For people like me, like Carmen, like everyone who's ever had to choose between dignity and survival. I want real power, not just the appearance of it. Done. I want us to be partners, not owner and property. I won't be your pretty accessory or your pet project. I wouldn't want you to be, and I want honesty. No more tests, no more games. If this is going to work, we have to trust each other completely. Walt lifted her hand, kissing her knuckles with lips that tasted like promises. Does that mean yes? She looked around the restaurant at the wealthy people dining on food that cost more than most families spend on groceries in a month. At the life she could choose, the power she could wield, the good she could.
But mostly, she looked at the man across from her. Imperfect, complicated, but offering her a love that felt real despite everything they'd been through to find it. Ask me again. He slipped from his chair, dropping to one knee in front of the entire restaurant. Conversation stopped. Phones came out, but his eyes never left her face. Kayla Thompson, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in everything? Will you help me become the man I always wanted to be? This time, when she said yes, it felt like coming home to a life she'd never dared to imagine. Have you ever had to choose between safety and possibility? Between a small life you could control and a large one that might change you? Sometimes love requires the biggest leap of faith we'll ever take. Share in the comments. What would your conditions be for a proposal like this? Have you ever walked into a room and instantly knew something was wrong? The feeling when everyone's smiling, but their eyes are telling a different story? Kayla stood in the marble lobby of the Plaza Hotel, watching Walt shake hands with men in expensive suits. The wedding planner, a woman with perfect teeth and cold eyes, kept checking her watch like time was money slipping away. 2 weeks had passed since Walt's proposal. 2 weeks of dress fittings, guest lists, and questions Kayla couldn't answer. Who were these people coming to celebrate their love? Why did Walt's business partners look at her like she was a temporary problem they needed to solve? The prenup sat heavy in her purse. 47 pages of legal language that basically said one thing. If this marriage ends in the first 5 years, Kayla gets nothing. Not a penny of the inheritance. Not even the money for her mother's treatment. Walt appeared beside her, his hand finding the small of her back. That touch that used to make her knees weak now felt calculated. Strategic. Nervous? He whispered against her ear. She turned to face him. This man who'd rescued her from poverty, who'd held her through panic attacks about her mother's condition, who'd made love to her like she was precious. This man who might be destroying her life with kindness. Should I be? His eyes flickered, just for a second, but she caught it. Kayla, we need to discuss something. He led her to a quiet corner where fake plants created an illusion of privacy. The kind of privacy that wasn't really private at all. Deja called me yesterday. Kayla's blood turned cold. What? She's been thinking about our conversation in Aspen, about the nature of my experiment. The word experiment hit like a physical blow. Even now, even after everything, he still called it that. Like her feelings were data points. Like her mother's cancer was a variable in his research. What did she say? Walt's fingers traced her jawline. A gesture that once felt loving now felt like he was examining merchandise. She said I was being unfair to you, that you deserve to know the whole truth before tomorrow. Kayla stepped back. What truth? Have you ever had someone look at you like they were deciding whether you could handle reality? Like they were measuring your strength against their secrets? The inheritance money, it's real. But it's not just about finding someone kind. It's about finding someone who can be molded. Someone grateful enough to never question my methods. The words hit her chest like stones. Methods? I've been testing you, Kayla. Every day since Aspen. The way you react to stress, to luxury, to moral choices. The way you respond to my touch, my demands, my gifts. She thought about the credit card he'd given her that she barely used. The way he seemed pleased when she chose simple things over expensive ones. The way he watched her during sex like he was taking mental notes. The other women before death, there were 12 of them over 2 years. All passed the initial kindness test. None passed the final evaluation. Which is what? Walt's smile was the smile of a man who'd never been denied anything in his life. Complete trust. Complete surrender. A partner who will never leave, never betray, never question my judgment. Kayla's hands started shaking. And if I don't pass, then you go back to Jackson, back to your mother's medical bills, back to serving coffee and pretending you don't hate your life. She wanted to slap him. She wanted to scream. Instead, she asked the question that would change everything. What happens if I do pass? Walt stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the heat from his body, remember how safe she'd felt in his arms just hours ago. Then you become my wife, my partner, my equal in every way that matters. But never your equal in truth. His silence was answer enough. Kayla closed her eyes. Behind her lids, she saw her mother's face. Weak but hopeful, trusting her daughter to find a solution to their impossible situation. She saw herself 6 months from now, living in a mansion, wearing designer clothes, writing checks to the best doctors in the country, playing the role of loving wife to a man who collected women like some people collected art. She saw herself in 10 years, trapped in golden handcuffs, wondering who she might have become if she'd been brave enough to walk away. When she opened her eyes, Walt was watching her with the intensity of a scientist observing a crucial experiment. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning. The wedding is at noon. He kissed her forehead like she was a child who'd scraped her knee. Gentle, patronizing, completely confident in his power over her choices. As he walked away to rejoin his business associates, Kayla pulled out her phone. Her mother had texted an hour ago. So proud of you, baby. You're going to be happy. Was she? Could someone be happy living a lie, even a comfortable one? The wedding planner approached with her clipboard and her smile that never reached her eyes. Mrs. Brenner? We need to finalize the seating chart. Mrs. Brenner, a name that felt like wearing someone else's skin. Kayla looked around the marble lobby filled with people celebrating a love story they didn't know was fiction. Tomorrow, she would walk down an aisle toward a man who'd never really seen her as anything more than his most successful experiment. Unless she didn't. Have you ever stood at the edge of your old life, looking toward a future that could save you or destroy you? Sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the most honest one. The question wasn't whether Walt loved her. The question was whether she loved herself enough to find out who she could become without his golden cage around her dreams. What would you do if someone offered you everything you needed, but took away everything you were? Kayla sat in her hotel room at 3 a.m., staring at her phone. Her wedding dress hung on the closet door like a beautiful ghost of the future she was supposed to want. The text from Deja had come 2 hours ago. Room 1247. We need to talk. Now she stood outside that door, knowing this conversation would either save her or damn her. Maybe both. Deja opened the door wearing silk pajamas and the kind of smile that said she'd been expecting this moment. Took you long enough. The room was identical to Kayla's, but felt completely different. Where Kayla had barely touched the luxury, Deja had made herself at home. Room service trays, expensive wine, clothes scattered like she owned the place. How are you here? Walt said you left. Deja poured 2 glasses of wine without asking. Walt says a lot of things. Doesn't make them true. She handed Kayla a glass and settled onto the couch like they were old friends catching up. Not 2 women who'd been pitted against each other in a billionaire's psychological experiment. I never left Aspen. I just moved to a different house. His house. Kayla's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. What? Oh, honey, you thought you were the only one? Walt's been testing women for 3 years. I was last year's winner. The room started spinning. Winner. Deja's laugh had sharp edges. That's what he called it. Said I passed all his tests. Kindness, loyalty, willingness to be shaped into his perfect partner. Then why are you here? Why isn't he marrying you? Because I learned something he didn't teach me. I learned I was worth more than his experiments. Deja reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope thick with papers. Financial records, contracts, emails between Walt and his lawyers about something called the Companion Project. Kayla's hands shook as she opened the envelope. Legal documents, bank statements, and printed emails that made her stomach twist. One email made her blood freeze. Subject: Kayla Thompson, final evaluation. Recommend proceeding with marriage contract. Subject shows optimal combination of gratitude, dependency, and emotional attachment. Low risk of future rebellion. He writes about us like we're investments. Because that's what we are. Walt doesn't want a wife. He wants an acquisition. Deja moved to sit beside her on the couch. Close enough that Kayla could smell her perfume, see the determination in her dark eyes. But here's what he doesn't know. While he was testing us, I was learning about him. She pulled out another set of papers. Walt Brenner isn't just rich. He's in trouble. His company is being investigated by the FBI for fraud. His assets are about to be frozen. He needs a wife who won't ask questions when money starts disappearing. Kayla's head was spinning. So the inheritance probably doesn't exist, or won't exist much longer. The wine tasted bitter now. Everything tasted bitter. Why are you telling me this? Deja reached over and touched Kayla's face. Gentle, real, nothing like Walt's calculated affection. Because you reminded me of who I used to be. Before I let a rich man convince me I was broken and needed fixing. Her thumb traced Kayla's cheekbone, a touch that asked permission instead of demanding compliance. And because you're beautiful when you're angry, really beautiful, Kayla felt something shift in her chest, a recognition she hadn't expected. The way Deja looked at her, like she was seeing a person, not a project. What are you saying? I'm saying we don't have to play his game. Either of us. Deja's hand slid to the back of Kayla's neck, fingers tangling in her hair. I'm saying there's another choice. The kiss was soft at first, tentative. Everything Walt's kisses weren't. No agenda behind it except this simple desire to connect with someone who understood. When they broke apart, Kayla's breathing was unsteady. Deja, I can't. My mother can be taken care of without Walt's money. Deja showed her another paper. A bank statement with Deja's name and a balance that made Kayla blink twice. I've been saving, working, planning. While Walt thought he owned me, I was building my own escape. That's enough for your mother's treatment, your college debt, a fresh start somewhere Walt Brenner can't find either of us. Kayla looked at this woman who'd been her competition, her enemy, her salvation, all in the space of 2 weeks. This woman who'd risked everything to warn her about tomorrow's trap. Why would you do this for me? Deja's smile was the first completely honest smile Kayla had seen since leaving Jackson. Because kindness shouldn't be a test. It should be a choice. She kissed Kayla again, deeper this time. Hands that explored instead of commanded. Touch that gave instead of took. When Kayla responded, pulling Deja closer, she wasn't thinking about Walt or money or tomorrow's wedding. She was thinking about how long it had been since someone touched her like she mattered more than what she could provide. They made love on the hotel room floor, still half-dressed, desperate and tender and completely honest. No performance, no evaluation, just two people choosing each other in a world that had tried to convince them they weren't worth choosing. Afterward, lying tangled together, Deja whispered against her ear, "We leave tonight." Before he can stop us. Kayla thought about her wedding dress hanging in the other room. Her mother's hopeful text messages. The life she was supposed to want. Then she thought about the way Deja had looked at Walt's financial records like she was studying a predator's habits. The way she'd saved money and planned an escape while pretending to be compliant. The way she kissed Kayla like she was precious instead of useful. Where would we go? Anywhere. Everywhere. Does it matter as long as we're free? Have you ever realized that the person you thought was your enemy was actually your mirror? Sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Kayla closed her eyes and made her choice. Have you ever tried to disappear from someone who has unlimited resources and a habit of collecting people? They had 4 hours until Walt expected Kayla to show up for wedding preparations. 4 hours to steal their freedom back from a man who thought he owned their futures. Deja moved through her hotel room like a general preparing for battle. Clothes folded and packed with military precision. Important documents sealed in waterproof bags. Cash divided between multiple hiding places in case they got separated. First rule of running from rich men: they always underestimate poor women's survival skills. Kayla watched from the bed, still wearing Deja's silk shirt, still trying to process that 6 hours ago she'd been planning to marry Walt Brenner. Now she was planning to vanish with the woman who'd save her from that fate. How do you know so much about this? Deja's hand stilled on her suitcase. Walt wasn't my first mistake, just my most expensive one. She sat on the bed's edge, close enough that Kayla could see the small scar above her left eyebrow. A story Deja hadn't told yet. I was 19, fresh out of foster care. Met a man who promised to take care of me forever. Her fingers traced the scar. Forever lasted until I asked too many questions about where his money came from. What happened? I learned to run fast and hide smart. Spent 2 years looking over my shoulder before I realized something important. Which was? Deja's smile had teeth in it. Rich men who hurt women usually hurt lots of women. And those women talk to each other if you know how to listen. She pulled out her laptop and showed Kayla a website that looked innocent enough. A forum for domestic workers sharing job experiences and safety tips. 17 women have worked for Walt in the past 5 years. Housekeepers, personal assistants, companions. All fired suddenly. All made to sign non-disclosure agreements. All paid just enough hush money to keep quiet. Kayla scrolled through posts that made her stomach turn. Stories about Walt's tests, his need to control every aspect of his employees' lives, his habit of making promises he never intended to keep. Why didn't they go to police? With what evidence? Walt's lawyers make sure everything looks legal. The women look like disgruntled employees who couldn't handle working for a demanding boss. Deja closed the laptop and pulled Kayla closer. But here's what his lawyers don't know. I've been documenting everything. Recording conversations. Copying files. You've been building a case. We've been building a case. Every woman he's hurt. Every life he's damaged with his experiments. Kayla thought about the prenup in her purse. The way Walt had watched her during their most intimate moments like he was taking notes. The business associates who looked at her like temporary entertainment. What do? We disappear. Let him think we ran away together in some romantic rebellion. While he's looking for us, my contact at the FBI gets all our evidence. You have a contact at the FBI? Deja's grin was pure mischief. Honey, you don't survive men like Walt without making friends in useful places. She kissed Kayla's neck, right below her ear. Besides, Agent Martinez has her own reasons for wanting Walt Brenner behind bars. Another one of his victims? Her sister was. 3 years ago. Suicide after Walt destroyed her career and reputation for refusing his advances. The room felt colder suddenly. Kayla understood now why Deja had risked everything to warn her. This wasn't just about saving one woman. This was about stopping a predator who'd been hunting for years. How long before he realizes we're gone? Long enough for us to get to the airport. I've got tickets to Seattle under names he'll never think to check. Deja showed her 2 driver's licenses with their photos but different names. Perks of knowing people who help women disappear from dangerous situations. Kayla stared at her fake identity. Rebecca Martinez, age 26, address in Portland, Oregon. A woman who didn't know Walt Brenner anything. After Seattle, wherever you want. I've got enough money to keep us comfortable while we figure out what comes next. What if he finds us? Deja's expression went hard. Then we make sure he regrets it. She opened her suitcase and showed Kayla something that made her breath catch. Not weapons, but worse for a man like Walt. Financial records, audio recordings, photographs, and a thumb drive labeled insurance policy. 3 years of evidence. Enough to destroy him completely if he comes after us. Kayla picked up one of the audio files. Walt's voice discussing her emotional vulnerabilities and how to maximize her dependency. Hearing herself described like a psychology experiment made her want to break something. Instead, She kissed Deja hard enough to bruise. Let's go. They moved like they'd been planning this for months instead of hours. Kayla's few belongings fit in one bag. Her mother's wedding ring, the only thing of value she owned, went into her pocket instead of onto Walt's finger tomorrow. At 5 a.m., they slipped out of the Plaza Hotel through the service entrance Deja had mapped during her weeks of preparation. A taxi waited, driver already paid, and instructed to take the long route to JFK Airport. As Manhattan disappeared behind them, Kayla felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope without strings attached. Freedom without a price tag. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Can't wait to see pictures of your special day. Kayla typed back. It's going to be more special than you can imagine. Just not in the way anyone expected. Have you ever walked away from everything you thought you wanted and discovered it was exactly what you needed? Sometimes the best wedding gift is the courage to not show up. The plane lifted off just as Walt Brenner was probably wondering why his bride-to-be wasn't answering her phone. By the time he realized she was gone, she was already becoming someone new. 6 months later, Rebecca Martinez opened her eyes to Seattle rain drumming against windows of the bookstore cafe she'd bought with her partner, Diana Santos. Those weren't their real names, but they'd become real people underneath them. People who chose each other every day instead of being chosen by someone else's experiment. The morning routine felt like a small miracle. Coffee brewed without someone timing how long it took. Books arranged on shelves because they loved them, not because they tested well with focus groups. A business built on genuine connection ends. Diana emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs and wearing the smile that still made Rebecca's heart skip. 6 months, and that smile hadn't become a performance or a strategy. Just pure happiness at seeing the woman she loved. FBI called this morning. Rebecca's hand stilled on her coffee cup. They'd been waiting for this call since they'd sent Agent Martinez their evidence 3 months ago. And Walt Brenner was arrested yesterday. Securities fraud, tax evasion, and Diana's smile turned savage. 18 counts of psychological abuse and coercion. Rebecca set down her coffee before her shaking hands could drop it. 18. More women came forward after the story broke. Turns out we weren't the only ones documenting his behavior. They sat in comfortable silence, processing the end of a chapter that had defined their lives for so long. Walt Brenner would spend the next decade in federal prison, his fortune seized to pay restitution to his victims. Justice felt strange, quieter than Rebecca had expected, less like victory and more like finally being able to breathe. There's something else, Diana said, pulling an envelope from her apron pocket. This came with the legal papers. Rebecca recognized her mother's handwriting immediately, the letter she'd been dreading for months. Baby girl, asterisk. I know you can't tell me everything about why you left, but I want you to know I'm proud of you. The doctors say I'm in remission. The experimental treatment worked better than anyone expected, asterisk. I don't know how you paid for it, but I know my daughter. You found a way to take care of your mama without sacrificing who you are, asterisk. I love you. Come home when you can, asterisk. Mama. Rebecca wiped tears she didn't know she'd been crying. Her mother's medical bills had been paid anonymously through a foundation Diana had discovered, one that helped families of abuse survivors. Agent Martinez had made sure Walt's seized assets funded their mission. She doesn't know about Walt. She knows you're safe and happy. That's enough for now. Diana moved to sit beside her on the couch they'd rescued from a thrift store and reupholstered together. Everything in their apartment told the story of building a life from scratch instead of inheriting someone else's vision. Do you miss it sometimes? The money, the luxury? Rebecca considered the question seriously. Did she miss silk sheets and designer clothes? 5-star restaurants and private jets? I miss feeling secure, she admitted. I don't miss feeling owned. Diana's fingers traced patterns on Rebecca's thigh, casual intimacy that still felt revolutionary after months of Walt's calculated touches. We're secure now. Different kind of secure, but real. Their bookstore was small, but profitable. Their apartment was tiny, but entirely their own. Their love was complicated, but honest in ways Rebecca was still learning to navigate. Besides, Diana said, sliding closer with the predatory smile that meant trouble in the best way. "We've got something Walt's money could never buy." "Which is?" Instead of answering, Diana kissed her neck, hands sliding under Rebecca's shirt to find skin that responded instantly to her touch. 6 months, and Diana still kissed her like she was discovering something precious. They made love on their rescued couch with Seattle rain providing the soundtrack, unhurried and unobserved. No performance metrics or psychological evaluations. Just two people choosing pleasure because it felt good, not because it served someone else's agenda. Afterward, tangled together under the blanket Diana's grandmother had crocheted, Rebecca felt something she'd never experienced in Walt's mansion. Complete peace. "What are you thinking about?" Diana asked, fingers combing through Rebecca's hair. "How different this is from what I thought I wanted. Better or worse?" Rebecca considered Walt's proposal 6 months ago. The inheritance that turned out to be imaginary. The marriage that would have been a beautiful prison. The life that would have killed her slowly while keeping her comfortable. "I thought I wanted to be saved," she said finally. "Turns out I wanted to save myself." Diana's laugh vibrated against her chest. "Good thing you're so good at it. They'd save each other, really." Diana, from believing she deserved men who treated her like property. Rebecca, from believing she wasn't worth more than someone else's charity. The phone rang. The landline they'd installed for the bookstore. Diana answered with her business greeting. "Chapter 2 books," Diana speaking. Rebecca watched her partner handle what sounded like a large order, professional and confident. This woman who'd risked everything to warn a stranger about danger. Who'd planned their escape with military precision. Who'd built a new life with the same determination she'd used to survive the old one. When Diana hung up, she was grinning. "Wedding party wants 50 copies of books about second chances." Seems fitting. Very fitting. Rebecca pulled Diana back down for another kiss, deeper this time. Outside, Seattle continued its gentle rain. Inside, two women who'd refused to be collected celebrated the most important lesson they'd learned. Sometimes the best love story starts when you walk away from the wrong one. Have you ever discovered that losing everything was actually finding yourself? Sometimes the most expensive mistake you can make is accepting someone else's definition of your worth. Their story wasn't the fairy tale Rebecca had imagined 6 months ago. It was better. It was real. 1 year later, Kayla Thompson sat in a courtroom watching Walt Brenner's sentencing, no longer hiding behind Rebecca Martinez's identity. She'd reclaimed her real name 6 months ago when Agent Martinez assured her Walt could never hurt her again. Diana had done the same, though they still called each other by the names they'd chosen during their escape. Some identities become more real than the ones you're born with. Walt looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit. Older. The man who'd seemed so powerful in his tailored suits now looked like what he'd always been, a predator who'd run out of prey. The judge's voice cut through the courtroom. 22 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Kayla felt Diana's hand squeeze hers. Around them, other women Walt had victimized wept with relief. Justice had taken a year, but it had come. As they left the courthouse, Kayla's phone buzzed with a call from Jackson, Mississippi. "Baby girl? I saw the news. Are you okay?" Her mother's voice carried across the miles like a warm hug. Kayla had told her the truth 3 months ago. Not all of it, but enough. Her mother deserved to know her daughter was a survivor, not just lucky. "Imperfect, Mama. How are you feeling?" "Strong as an ox. The doctors say I'm officially in full remission." Kayla closed her eyes against happy tears. Her mother was alive. Walt was in prison. She was free and in love and building something beautiful from the ashes of her old life. "When are you bringing that girlfriend of yours home? I want to meet the woman who helped save my baby." Diana grinned beside her, apparently hearing every word through the phone. "Tell her we'll be there for Christmas." "Christmas," Kayla promised. "And Mama?" "Her name's Diana. Gianna Santos. I don't care what her name is, long as she makes you happy." After they hung up, Diana pulled Kayla into an alley between buildings and kissed her against the brick wall. Public displays of affection still felt revolutionary after a year of hiding, then 6 months of caution. "So we're going to Mississippi for Christmas?" if you want to meet my family. Fair warning, they're going to ask when we're getting married. Diana's eyes sparkled with mischief. What should we tell them? Kayla hadn't expected that question to hit so hard. Marriage felt complicated after Walt's manipulation. But Diana wasn't Walt. Their love hadn't been built on psychological experiments and power games. We'll tell them we're already committed to each other in every way that matters. But maybe someday we'll want to make it official. On our terms. They walked hand in hand back to their hotel, passing the courthouse where Walt's victims had finally seen justice. Some were crying. Others looked stunned. All looked free in a way Kayla recognized. That evening, in their hotel room, Diana surprised her with something she'd been carrying for weeks. "This isn't a proposal," she said, pulling out a small jewelry box. "It's a promise." Inside was a simple silver ring engraved with coordinates. Seattle, where we became real. Kayla slipped it onto her right hand, saving her left for if and when they decided to make it official. The ring fit perfectly, like Diana had been paying attention to details that mattered. "What's your promise?" "That we'll keep choosing each other. Every day. No tests, no experiments, no conditions." Diana had her own ring, identical except for the engraving. Jackson, Mississippi, where kindness began. They made love that night with a tenderness that had replaced the desperate hunger of their early days. Slow and thorough and completely present. No ghosts of Walt's manipulation. No fear of being discovered or separated. Just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of someone else's cruelty and decided to build something beautiful. "What do you think we'd be doing right now if we'd never met?" Diana asked afterward, tracing patterns on Kayla's back. "I'd probably be dead. Maybe not literally, but..." Kayla thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. Desperate, grateful for scraps, willing to accept any rescue, even if it came with chains. "I'd have married him. Been miserable, but safe. Rich, but empty. And I'd still be running from rich men instead of building something with the woman I love." They talked until sunrise about the life they were creating. The bookstore was thriving. Diana's coffee roasting business had taken off. They were thinking about buying the building, maybe expanding into the space next door. Small dreams, but entirely their own. As morning light filled their hotel room, Kayla realized something that would have shocked the desperate waitress she'd been 13 months ago. She was happy. Not grateful for scraps, happy, or this will do happy. Actually, genuinely, completely happy with a life she'd built through her own choices. The inheritance Walt had promised turned out to be real after all, just not what anyone expected. Not money or mansions or security bought with dependents. The real inheritance was learning she was worth more than someone else's charity. Worth more than tests and experiments and conditional love. Worth choosing and being chosen by someone who saw her as she was and loved her anyway. "Ready to go home?" Diana asked, already packing their things. "Home. Seattle." The bookstore with windows that looked out on people living their own complicated, beautiful lives. The apartment above it where they'd learned to love without keeping score. More than ready. Have you ever realized that the best things in life can't be inherited, only earned? Sometimes the greatest fortune is discovering you were never poor to begin with, just looking for treasure in the wrong places. Kayla Thompson had started this journey looking for a savior and found something better. Herself. And in finding herself, she'd found the love of someone who'd been on the same journey. That was worth more than all of Walt Brenner's money could ever buy. The story ended where the best ones do. Not with a wedding or a fortune, but with two people choosing each other over and over again, one honest day at a time.